On today's show, Drake and Kendrick Lamar weren't the only ones wilding out on Friday night as the San Diego Padres trade for all-star second baseman of the Miami Marlins, Luis Arraez, giving my initial reaction on that move, what it means for the team and the lineup going forward, as well as the return they gave up, and then continuing my preview with Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks for this Padres-Diamondbacks series. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Saturday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You might be familiar with my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, which you can check out, as well as my new podcast, Baseball versus the World. But, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, aside from following the podcast where you get your podcast from, this is a bonus episode of this podcast. It's usually Monday through Friday, but instead, because I was continuing my crossover with Millard, which we will get into soon, for just general Padres-Diamondbacks sort of thoughts, NL West stuff. I talk a little bit about Profar, so that's fun. But the Padres decided to go scorched earth again. The Padres decided to make all the headlines again, trading for Luis Arraez of the Miami Marlins. The final trade, as reported firstly by Craig Mish, I believe, and then the deal first broke, I should say, from Jeff Passan, and the details from Craig Mish. The Padres are receiving Luis Arraez in return for prospects Dylan Head, Nathan Martorella, Jacob Marcy, and then Woo-Sak Go, right-handed pitcher. So here's the thing. I think that with this, we have to take into account a bunch of things. First of all, the Padres did not give up any of their top prospects, in a big way. They gave up Woo-Sak Go, he's been in Double-A. It seems like that is a flyer they took on a player, not a big flyer. They didn't take too much of a money investment on him, only two years, $4 million or whatever. But that has seemed to not work out. It seems like the best prospect they gave up was Dylan Head, who I've heard has just got freakish athletic skills. He's super fast, but anyway. That's, I feel like, a topic for another discussion, right? We're only going to go over my initial reaction for this trade. And the big thing we got to talk about is Luis Arraez, obviously. Look, this guy's a bat-to-ball machine. That's what he's been for a long time. His entire career, pretty much. This is a dude who, while he doesn't have a ton of power, yes, he hit 10 home runs last year, but he's just not a power guy. He is one of the great bat-to-ball dudes that you will quite simply ever see. I'm not even just saying that, literally, like in terms of every year. WRC plus over 100 every single year of his career, with the lowest being in 2021 when he had a 105, and he still hit 294 that year with a 357 on base, right? So this is a guy that just does that. He doesn't strike out, doesn't walk as much you would like, but he doesn't strike out, he puts the ball in play. So that's really good. And in terms of some of his other stats, absolutely murders righties. And one of the things that I like about this is, one of the things with the Padres, they haven't always been so good at having these, platoon sort of matchups. So in my opinion, there's some potential that you maybe put Eggy Rosario in at DH sometimes if you want to be like your lefty killer, right? Or you can put in Arraez for most of the time, although I imagine Arraez will still probably bat against lefties too, but I'm just saying he's very, very good against righties especially. So from that perspective, it's very cool. And also has been really good just in high leverage situations. This from my guy Tommy, who you might be familiar with on Twitter. Luis Arraez, career high leverage situations, he's got a 136 WR plus, he's hitting 344, and then with runners in scoring position, 140 WRC plus, hitting 365. So like, this is a guy who just knows how to put the ball in play. He is a pure hitter. Don't worry about the power, right? And also, by the way, don't worry about the defensive stuff. One of the biggest things that would be a concern for the Padres is the fact that he's a very bad defensive player. I believe -8 outs above average or something like that last time I checked. So not very good. I don't think he's like heinous, like the worst in baseball or anything like that, but he's not very good. But he's probably going to be the everyday DH. And he's going to be this pesky guy who just gets on base. And the Padres haven't had someone quite like this, at least in my time covering this team. In fairness, no team has basically had players like this, right? These batting average freaks. A guy who looks like he belongs in the game of yesteryear where it was more about singles and base hits and all that stuff, right? That's what we're talking about here with Luis Arraez. But I will say that there are some concerns. As I tweeted last night, yes, it's great that no defense, well, the defense won't be a minus. It's also great that you add a lefty bat to this lineup that's very righty dependent outside Jake Cronenworth. I know that Merrill has been great, but that's still a rookie, right? It's still worth bringing up that is a rookie. And he has succeeded well, and he actually had an RBI double in yesterday's game, so shouts to him. Maybe he's coming out of that slump he's been in lately, but it's still a rookie. And aside from him and Cronenworth, no major trustworthy lefties. And again, Merrill's still a rookie, so we'll have to see how that transpires. I'm talking really fast. My apologies. It's just been a crazy last 10 hours. What can I say? But the other part of this is, more of a philosophical one, I think, which is worth getting into. Right. And I'm going to talk about it from the negative for a second. And what I mean by the negative is just this Padres team under AJ Preller has made so many blockbuster, crazy headline grabbing moves. Right. All these big moves. And this has nothing to do with the trades in a vacuum. If you isolate each trade, I don't really have one that's I'm going to get on people. I said this before with the signing of Xander Bogaerts. I didn't hate that move as much as, it's easy to hate it now. Hindsight's 2020, but it's more the fact that you did them all at once is the issue, right? And then you, of course, lose Juan Soto because you gave everyone money except for Soto. And then they just keep doing this. And don't get me wrong, they've been able to refurbish their farm system better than anyone. AJ Preller clearly has an amazing scouting acumen, but it is worth bringing up and saying this. Just playing devil's advocate. Nobody get mad at me. I'm just saying that they've made all these big trades and it doesn't always result in empirical, tangible success on the very basic level of wins. Since AJ Preller took over the Padres, they have not won over 89 games. Considering all the big trades from Snell and Darvish and Adam Frazier and Luis Arraez, that's a new one, Juan Soto and Mike Clevenger and all these sorts of players that they've acquired over these years, and it's never resulted in consistency in at least just being a contender, especially lately when you have an extra wild card spot. So that's my issue. No more than 89 wins. That's the best. Now, this is the type of team that if they did make the postseason, could make a whole lot more noise. It's one of those things where they're a team that has less of a chance to win their division than they have a chance to win the World Series. Right? They literally, it feels like they have a greater chance of that as long as they make the postseason. And having a guy like Arraez on a postseason roster is very exciting because he's the type of guy that I don't think will go quietly into the night, right? He's just going to hit. And then you just have to hope people drive him in. He gets things starting. He's a spark plug. That's what we love about him. But I do have to admit, from a more philosophical, maybe even esoteric sense, for whatever reason, even if it looks good on paper, this Padres team tends to struggle with these sort of moves in the sense that they just don't show up completely. They're never firing on all cylinders. Heck, last year or 2 years ago when they acquired Soto, he was initially bad, and then Brandon Drury and Josh Bell weren't that great either. People might forget, they also acquired those two guys at the deadline too, and they didn't show up for them. So that's my thing is, it seems like they are usually flash over substance, and that has nothing to do with the Arraez move in a vacuum. It should be great on paper. In fact, I think he fits this team better than the Marlins because the Marlins don't have a lot of good offensive players, and a guy who's a singles bat to ball dude, that's just not going to carry an offense. For the Padres, they kind of need a guy who's just going to get on base and be driven in. Just kickstart the lineup a bit. Be a constant force, a pest in this lineup. He doesn't have to carry the offense at all. That's what Tatis, Cronenworth, Machado, theoretically Xander Bogaerts, Jackson Merrill and Campy and Profar apparently, who's just Juan Soto now. All those guys, he fits this team so much better than the Miami Marlins because he does not have to shoulder the load. He won't be the best offensive player. So that's cool. But I'm just saying, tangibly, hasn't always resulted in the most wins. So I'm being cautiously optimistic because there's been so many trades that I've seen following this team for the 5 years I've been covering them that are so much more exciting in the moment than they end up be versus other teams that just know how to build a more complete roster without completely, exploding your farm system and stuff like that. Now, I will say last two things I want to mention. Someone actually tweeted at me saying, let me see if I can pull you up, my guy. On Twitter, at Padres _fan67, Jake, he said, I fear he'll be the next Adam Frazier who was hitting .324 when we traded for him. And look, I will say, I do think that is a fair concern, but I don't think it's quite the same because Adam Frazier had never really been a plus bat his whole career, and the batting average on balls in play just skyrocketed one year. It clearly looked like this was a guy who just benefited from some good luck and whatnot. Luis Arraez, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, not the case. This has been at minimum a 290 hitter every single year. Every single year. Think about that for a second. So that's not something that's going to fall off, at least in my opinion, especially for longer. And then the last thing I want to mention really quickly, though, to dunk on y'all, not dunk, but hey, a lot of people, they've been saying the Padres have, extra $5 million. Why aren't they going out and just using it? And I've been defending the Padres with the money thing as someone who always complains about money in the sport. Give them a second. And here's what I mean. It's a much deeper free agent class next year, and everyone's complaining, why won't we get Tommy Pham when we get Eddie Rosario? Give them a second. They clearly are still down to spend money. They traded for Dylan Cease like they want to do that. They just need to reset because of the TV deal and the salary cap and all that, and the luxury tax threshold, I should say, and the fact that they'll be, back at it, I think, hopefully next year. Luis Arraez has now a salary, right? Like his salary actually got extended for like $10 million a year, and I think that the Padres aren't paying for all $10 million. I think they're going to be paying for like 6 of it. I believe. I don't know the exact cash because the Marlins also sent back cash, and the Padres are a little bit cash stripped right now. So I'm just saying, there's what they were saving that extra money for everyone complaining about not getting Tommy Pham, Eddie Rosario, Brandon Belt, whatever. Well, this might be the reason why that he was working on this trade, and he knew I'm going to need some of this remaining that we can spend to stay under that luxury tax threshold. I'm going to need to save it for a rise. So just keep that in mind going forward. But yeah, that's basically my reaction. I can't wait to see him play. It's fun that this is the type of player you add to a lineup. I think fans, if he hits the way he usually does, are going to really like this guy because he's such a throwback to old school bat-to-ball skill baseball, and I can't wait to see more. And I really think that he's more valuable to this Padres lineup than the Marlins and a bunch of other teams, frankly. They need someone who can just be a pest and get on base. And when there are people in scoring position, he's at least going to put the ball in play, not to do unproductive outs. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff. That's what I think he is. Solid meat and potatoes, and I think this team could use a little meat and potatoes. But folks, that's not all for today's episode. We're going to go now and switch over with my buddy Millard to give you the bonus sort of content talking about Padres and Diamondbacks, where I talk a little bit about Jurickson Profar, and we talk about some under-the-radar players for both teams, et cetera, all that good stuff. So long for now. Remember to send me your questions or anything like that in the YouTube comments, DM on Twitter, whatever, for Friday's or Monday's episode. I'll probably retread a couple of my points, but we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. Until next time, though, I'll see you there. And without further ado, let's get to Millard.
Back here, part 2, Javier Reyes, Locked On Padres, here with Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks, of course. Javi, on the last podcast, we talked about some of the struggling stars from the Bogarts, the Machados, and the Tatises, and the Carrolls. I actually never said, I'm still fully confident in Tatis becoming a superstar by the end of the season. I have a friendly wager with one of my friends that he will finish top 8 in MVP voting in the National League. I just feel pretty confident in that one, despite the numbers right now. Now, Machado, this is a year 2 where he has not looked as good, so a little bit of a concern there, but I do think there's probably more confidence in him bouncing back than a Xander Bogaerts. But when you look at the rest of the Padres lineup, there is one guy in particular that stands out in a big way statistically compared to the rest of the guys. A former 5-tool, number 1 overall prospect in Major League Baseball, who in his 11th season, I believe, is finally having the breakout that we've all been waiting for. I am talking about maybe the San Diego Padres' favorite player, the Friars' faithful favorite player, Jurickson Profar. Javi, what has gone on? Is this man on PEDs? I don't want to throw out any accusations, but 11th season breakout for Profar. Where did this come from, Javi?
First of all, it's Jurickson. I don't want you going all Jurassic on me. Did you just watch Jurassic Park? That's what it was, right? You just watched Jurassic Park.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, you said Jurickson.
Jurickson Profar. It just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Hey, Jurickson is, I might like say that privately, like whenever he hits a home run. You know what I mean? And I've said his last name weird before too. But anyway, first of all, don't appreciate you throwing out the 3-letter word. I don't appreciate that, but
that's fair.
It's funny that you said like most likable, probably based just off of my tweets that I send out every 3 seconds about him. Jurickson Profar is why I love baseball. Like straight up, like this is why I love this sport, because there is no player out there for at least contending teams. Maybe there's some other under the radar ones I don't know about that had less signs that they would be good than Jurickson Profar.
Yeah.
If you go by Fangraphs wins above replacement, quite literally the worst qualified player in all of baseball last year. He was -10, like 13 defensive runs saved, -10 outs above average. He couldn't play defense. And by the way, he was in cores, right? Like to add insult to injury, you were in one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks, comes to the Padres, and he's Ruth. Like it's unbelievable. He's coming off an 8-game winning streak. We'll see if he continues that against the D-backs. And I've said it many times on my pod. I don't think that it's totally impossible that he replicates what he did with the Padres 2 years ago before he left and ends up going to the Rockies. He tried to get paid and whatnot. Where it's like a 2.5 win player. I think that is absolutely legit. But Millard, it keeps going. You know what I mean? At some point, I'm like, is this just a new thing? And I'll say one thing also. If he stinks it for the rest of the way, it will literally be worth it just for this month that he's put together, because all they did was 1 year, 1 million. But it's been amazing. It is evidence of vibes mattering, right? All that stuff. But this is a guy who currently leads the Padres. I believe he still leads the Padres in WRC plus with 178, which is insane. His weighted on base is 420. So shouts to him. He's been killing it there. Just unbelievable stuff. And the big thing I think that has been with him is he's walking a lot. He puts together tough, good at bats. Is he always going to get a hit? No. And is he always going to draw a walk? No. But he sees a lot of pitches, which is why he's been moved up to be the leadoff hitter, which is crazy. But it's true. And he's just been a monster. And ever since, he started blowing up more with the Will Smith comment, maybe he's just on some revenge thing. Maybe he's just angry. Maybe he's walking into the plate like Kendrick Lamar in his diss track with Drake, where he's just like angry. And he's just like, Kendrick said, Millard said, whoa, easy. Okay, maybe he's not that angry. I don't want to say Profar's that angry. But he's just
Will Smith, I hate your hair. I hate this.
I hate the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. I think that Profar, I just need a little bit more time, because I just need to see, because I'm just so not appalled, like just taken aback by what's been happening with this guy. Where like every statistic, with the exception of a couple, like say his barrel percentage has been a little bit down, but we're a month in. And for people who are commenting, oh, well, Javi, stop. He started off hot in the 2022 season. 2022 season, he had about a 116, 122 WRC plus to start, which is great. This year, he's got a 166 to start. Like, guys, that's a huge jump. So I'm starting to wonder, it is the 11th year, but he's 31, right? Like, but if this keeps up, even if he has a decline or whatever, but if he's this guy who's going to have a high batting average, if he's going to have a 13% walk rate, 15% strikeout rate, maybe hit you 20 home runs, we're talking about like one of the greater transformations. It's like not to the high upsides here, but like a Jose Bautista level transformation. Yeah, Jose Bautista, for those who don't remember, like wasn't anything for a while. They made some adjustments to his swing or whatever, and then he had that like 6-year stretch where he was like one of the 10 best players in baseball for a little bit. I'm not saying that Profar is going to be one of the 10 best players in baseball, but that type of unexpected turnaround to becoming a relevant player, that's what we're looking at with Profar right now. And I've been loving it, and it's fantastic, and I'm happy and joyful. Even if the Padres sometimes let me down, Jurickson Profar has not.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the Jose Bautista call is a good one, because really, when we look at Bautista's numbers, like those first 5, 6, 7 years of his career, he did absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden, 54 home runs, breakout season. Then he's like a 40 home run guy, like for the rest of his career after age 30. And for Profar, you look at his career numbers. Right now, it's 242 average, 714 OPS. So he's never been a guy to statistically ever put up big numbers or anything. And right now, with the pace that he's on, obviously still small sample size, 34 games, but he has 21 RBIs. His career high is 77. He has 17 walks. His career high is 73. So he's probably, if he continues this at like a 70% clip for the rest of the season, he's probably going to shatter every career record that he's ever put up in a singular season before. So I don't know how many guys in Major League history have we seen scuffle the first decade of their career, then all of a sudden look like an MVP candidate that 11th season. Like it's wild to say, right?
The only explanation I could have is that he was a former top prospect for a reason. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just because he was, not even maybe, like he was derailed completely by multiple shoulder injuries that just took away a lot of his power. But dude, I don't know, man. Like, I'm starting to believe it. It's a little bit too much for me to not believe it. He's still not great defensively, which is one of the reasons they have to take him out of the game. Sometimes they bring in Jose Azocar. He hasn't been like dreadful, but he's not a plus defender. So that's going to keep some of his upside a little bit down. But as a batter, this is the type of stuff that teams that want to contend need. They need those unexpected guys who step up. And for $1 million, that's what the Padres are getting right now. It's incredible, man. It's incredible.
Crazy value. I think for the D-backs, the guy that I would compare Profar the most to, I guess, on the D-backs would be like a Ketel Marte, who is finally back to looking like that 2019 version of Ketel Marte, because a couple years ago, 2022, felt like maybe Ketel Marte was in the decline or something. Like he had a really bad 2022 season, 240 average, 727 OPS over 137 games. The 2020 year also wasn't so good for him. So it was like 2 of the next 3 years after his MVP candidacy type season, he wasn't super productive. And then that year in between, he was dealing with injuries. So it was kind of like a 3-year hiatus where Marte was just kind of scuffling. You really didn't know what ceiling of player he was after that 2019 season. And this year, he's just back to being a hitting machine at the top of the lineup for the D-backs. He's been incredible, specifically in the first inning, batting like over 400 or like a 1,300 OPS. Been one of the reasons why the D-backs have been so good at scoring in the first inning this season. So when I'm looking at which 2 players can make the biggest impact offensively for both our teams, I'm probably keying in on both Ketel Marte and Jurickson Profar, because they seem to have the 2 hottest bats for our
Jurickson. You did it again.
Jurickson? Do I keep saying Jurickson?
You keep doing Jurickson. It's kind of funny though. I kind of like it.
Jurickson. Jurickson?
That's what you gotta do.
All right. Jurickson Profar and Ketel Marte, the 2 pillars of each team in their lineup.
Yeah.
We'll see.
As everyone expected, yeah.
As everyone expected. Maybe Marte, but Profar, definitely, at least not on my bingo card. I mean, I've written him off for, 8 straight seasons now? I would like to think my gamble has been correct on most of those seasons. But this year, he has rewritten the history books on his career. I'm very curious when we have our crossovers in the future, what the stats are going to be saying for Profar, because if it's the All-Star break, if it's 3 quarters into the season and he's still like a 290, 850 OPS guy, 120 DRC plus, like that would be absolutely insane. And I wouldn't even know what to say about that.
It would be nuts. I can't wait to see how it all transpires. I think both of our teams, while they've had some like seismically disappointing with Corbin Carroll and Xander Bogaerts, they've also had some great production from it's so funny how evenly matched up these teams are on paper, where like our best star could go toe to toe with your best star, et cetera, et cetera. And like this year, Jake Cronenworth has been making a bounce back. He's hitting the ball harder than ever, playing great defense. And then Christian Walker, he's amazing too. And dare I say, one of the like 10 most underrated batters in the sport. I know he hit a walk-off the other day. For my FanDuel homies, let's just say against Michael King, Christian Walker, King's given up a lot of home runs. I would look into it. That might happen this weekend. Christian Walker might hit something to Mars off of Michael King. It's totally possible that may happen. But yeah, man, I just think that we'll see how it transpires as the year goes on. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what Corbin Carroll's numbers look like. I can't wait to see if Eugenio Suarez gets hot, right? Like, I can't wait to see if Jock Peterson, who by WRC Plus has been the best batter on the team, and that's not all, obviously. Ketel Marte adds a little bit more. But just as a hitter in his role has been successful, which he always is, low key, by the way. Jock Peterson, like everywhere he goes, if you use him in the right role, which isn't like an everyday player who hits against both righties and lefties and doesn't play a lot of defense, he's going to hit. He always does. Like, he's actually really effective at it, low key, in his role. Though that's the key thing, is in his role. You can't just, in a vacuum, you can't just put this guy anywhere and it's going to work. But I can't wait.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
He's a huge X factor with all the righties that the Padres are going to be throwing. I mean, Jock Peterson, like you said, outside Ketel Marte, you could probably make the argument Jock Peterson is actually the hottest D-backs hitter. He just doesn't play every day. But in this series, with the Padres throwing out some righties, hopefully we could get a big Jock performance going against, he loves playing in the NL West and going against an NL West team. Hopefully he could come through against the San Diego Padres. Now, speaking of Jock Peterson, that's an off-season move there. And I want to ask you, Javi, about one of the off-season moves that the Padres pulled off that I thought was really, really savvy. And we'll talk about that in segment number 2. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicles and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover with Javier Arraez. Javi, one of the sneaky moves that the Padres did this offseason was not handing out a big bag to their closer, Josh Hader, who has gone to the Houston Astros and not really been that good. Meanwhile, you look at the stats for your little closer, Robert Suarez, and he's got a sub-1 ERA. How savvy of a move was that by the San Diego Padres? Did you expect Josh Hader? Did you see in the numbers? Were you thinking, what? Smart move by the Padres to let him walk and let the Astros end up signing him.
There wasn't anything in numbers that I think I saw. He had a career year, was fantastic. The bad vibes with Hader were mostly just behavioral, in the sense that it was really annoying that he would never go more than 3 outs. Now there's a ton of reasons for that. The way the Brewers treated him, and Preller should know that. And you got to know, look, it's okay for the player to be I'm looking after myself until I get paid because I saw what Milwaukee did to me. Okay, blah, 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 blah. But even still, I think players know that too. And it just left a bad taste in your mouth that it's dude, we're still in playoff contention. You won't go more than 3 outs. It was just really, really weird. I don't think that's going to end you. You know what I mean? I just don't. But now he's really struggling. And on the Robert Suarez side of it, or actually with Hader, I don't think there was numbers thing. The only thing that you can maybe argue is a general sports thing, which is always someone who peaks right before, not peaks, but in Hader's case necessarily. Well, it might be at this point, but because he's always been good is what I'm trying to say. It's not like this came out of nowhere. So, but you might be wondering, oh, maybe he saved his great season there, and now he can't possibly replicate it. I think he'll be better, but it's been kind of crazy how bad he's been. Both him and Ryan Presley, by the way, of the Astros have both been bad. It's been one of the weirder developments that I can think of in the league. Just frankly, I don't understand how both of these elite closers have just completely fallen off. I think it's one of the weirder things going on right now. And some other guys in that rotation too. But I think that with the Padres, Robert Suarez was capable of this. 2 years ago, his rookie year, basically old rookie, was awesome. He really was. This guy had an electric fastball. It's still up there. He throws gas. He absolutely does. And while, yes, he's infamous for the Harper home run, which frankly, I think is a manager issue because they shouldn't have had him in the game in the first place. But, he's done something like this before, and that was his first season, 2.27 ERA. His strikeout rate was enormous. I don't think it's going to stay this way. I just don't like how he's increased his stuff. Don't get me wrong, he looks solid, but I don't think he's in the elite tier. But bottom line, though, is how he has looked infinitely better. I think he's located his pitches better, but he's not striking out nearly as many batters as he did that first year. So at some point, I'm all right, when is the regression going to kick in? Hopefully not anytime soon. But one thing I do know that's for sure is that he's been awesome and has been much needed for this Padres bullpen. And the other savvy move they did was they gave up Scott Barlow for Enyel De Los Santos, who's also been awesome and much better than Scott Barlow. So shouts to the Padres. Who would have known Robert Suarez and Santos greater than sign Scott Barlow and Josh Hader. So that's kind of been like one of the cool, like you said, savvy things they did this offseason is they retooled their bullpen. Yeah, Yuki Matsui has been fantastic. They completely retooled their bullpen outside of Tom Cosgrove and Robert Suarez, basically. And they've gotten big contributions, and I'm hoping you might see Adrian Morejon, who has been a failed starter in a lot of ways, but he's been showing some good stuff as a reliever. So this Padres bullpen's great, man. And they just called up this kid, Jeremiah Estrada. So when you look at the Padres and you look at their rotation, this is why they've stayed in games. Dylan Cease, who we talked about in the first segment on the previous episode, and then their bullpen, where basically everyone has been phenomenal for the most part. So, and I don't think it's fluky either. I think they've been really good. So it's really cool to see that they opted for, we'll spend some money, but instead we trade Barlow, right? You take his salary and get Matsui Busako, and then you save some money getting rid of Josh Hader to put elsewhere. And look at the bullpen. It's been really solid with Wandy Peralta being the weak link of the team. And even he's still pretty good.
Yeah, maybe this series really comes down to like the D-backs starting pitching versus the Padres pen, because like you said, the bullpen is more the strength for you guys as compared to the rotation outside of Dylan Cease. But for the D-backs, it's been the opposite. Their pen has been really bad the whole season, especially in high leverage games, late in close games. The D-backs have not been able to preserve leads. They've been not able to keep it to one-run games. And the bullpen has been a big issue for this team this year. You got guys stepping up in the rotation like the Slades that we talked about in the last podcast. Fott has been fine. Ryan Nelson is expected to start the finale coming off the injured list, but he's been better in his last couple starts. So from a rotation standpoint, despite all the injuries, I don't feel that bad about this D-back starting rotation. It's that bullpen that gives D-back fans a lot of problems and issues. So this series might come down to the pitching. Padres pen versus the D-back starters, and whichever one of those groups can be better might lead to who can win this series. And, past the other in, the NL West standings. And who knows, whoever wins the series might end up being second in the NL West when it is all said and done by the end of the season. But Javi, I do want to ask you, what has gone on with Joe Musgrove this season? Because I do have him on a fantasy team, and he's been not good for me.
He's been shaky. I think he's still working off some rust. It was alluded to in an Athletic article by Dennis Lin, and in conversation with him, he was shut down with injury last year. I think that's still affecting him a little bit, and I think that's evidenced by he didn't throw a ball faster than 93 miles per hour, which he usually is like a 94 guy until recently, and he's been doing that more recently. And in his early starts, he was not doing that, so he's throwing shorter. He was missing his spots, but I still think he has. Again, he had a really nice start against the Reds. His curveball was working at points, slider was working too. So with him, I would give it some time. He's not a guy who's going to have like dynamite, oh my gosh, 7 runs, 1 hit, 13 Ks, but he's going to be as steady as they come. I just don't, there was no warning sign outside the injury, which could be something that affects him for a long time. Hopefully it doesn't. But outside of that, I mean, this has been a guy who's averaged like a 3.04 ERA over these last 4 years. He's not a one-hit wonder. He's not a no-hitter wonder when he threw the one no-hitter against the Rangers. Like, he's been great. ERA by year. Even the last year with the Pirates, 3.86 isn't that bad, right? And not to mention his peripherals were better that year too. Then 3.18, 2.93, 3.05. I think he's going to get better, but it has been a bad start. But I just have some confidence that it'll be better. Or at the very least, he won't be this 6 ERA guy, right? Like, he's going to at least be better. Maybe he can do what Brandon Pfaadt's doing, right? Like at minimum. And that's what I'm expecting from him. So don't drop him from your fantasy team. Bogarts.
Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it might be time, man. I think it might be time. Yeah, you might have to.
Well, this is going to be a big weekend series for me personally when checking out my fantasy lineup with the Bogarts, the Tatises, the Machados, the Musgroves. I even have Robert Suarez on the team. I even have Jurickson Profar in the league that we're in together. I picked him up this week, Javi. You're just sitting there on the waiver wire. Locked On Padres did not pick up Jurickson Profar, guys. Crazy, just sitting there on the waiver wire. So big matchup for the NL West. Big matchup for the fantasy standings. Javi, want to give a prediction before we wrap up today's podcast?
No.
It's always like my 2 out of 3, right? That's like the default answer for anything.
That's why I was so upset. First series of the year, I predicted that the Padres would win 3 out of 4 and just kill the Giants. And everyone's like, look at this idiot. And I'm like, I tried to be different. I didn't just do they'll split it or whatever. No, I was like, yeah, they're gonna kill them. And they didn't. But yeah, I think that this is going to be a series there might be some fun in this series. I think we might get some really good offense from both teams. Maybe from the Padres coming against the bullpen of the D-backs as opposed to the D-backs coming against the starting pitching. I think that there's a lot of potential for fun. These teams don't have like any bite, savagery beef between the two of them, but even still, they're both good teams, and I'm really excited to see how it transpires. And I'm telling you, Christian Walker, that Michael King gig, might hit one to Jupiter. It's totally possible that he does that. So keep an eye out for that. I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great series. I like the D-backs team. I think they have a lot of good players. And this is a very important series from a perspective like going forward because both have been underperforming. Both are kind of the same spot in the standing. So how does that look like at the end of the inning? Who gets the bragging rights to be like, okay, definitively for now, one of these two will be the second best team in the division.
Yep. A lot of podcasts, D-backs, Padres talk on today's Locked On Diamondbacks and Locked On Padres crossover. Javi, where can the listeners find you online? I'm going to stay away from the predictions as well.
You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, the best handle in the game. And of course, Locked On Padres, wherever you get your podcast from, including on YouTube. If you want to see the YouTube and you want to say hi to Pac-Man and Tatis, you can do that. Locked On Padres on YouTube.
Yep, at Career Times 24 for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks Twitter, Instagram, and of course Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Another crossover, Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres. We'll see who wins the series and ends up number 2 in the NL West. Doses.